All right, in this video, we're going to talk about Tkinter geometry managers. So, what a geometry manager does is that it determines the location and sizes of the widgets within its parent container. So, up till now, we've just been using sort of the main window, and then we've been putting our widgets into that main window. And we've been using pack, which you'll see is one of the three main geometry managers. So there's, like I said, three. We've been using pack. The other two are place and grid. And so they locate, you put your widgets in there, and then it will locate where they're supposed to go in there according to some rules. Now, the rules can get pretty complicated. I'm not going to go over every single detail in there because it would take a really long time to do that. I'm just in these videos going to just talk about the general things that are done by these three geometry managers. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the place geometry manager. It is the simplest of the three geometry managers. When you use place, you have to specify where everything goes. All right. So, and you do that using a coordinate system that's very similar to what you might see in algebra class. It has an x coordinate and a y coordinate. And so you just specify that for every single widget in there. So you have, pretty much complete control over where everything goes. And that's pretty simple. The trouble is if you want to make a really complicated user interface with many widgets and you want to make it look good, then that might take a lot of work and be pretty tedious to have to, keep moving things, pixel by pixel in there. So that's the downside of using place. All right, let's take a look at an example of that. So we're going to go with the place geometry manager. Okay, so just as before, we're going to import Tkinter and we're going to make the root window, give it a title and geometry. And then here I create a bunch of widgets, a button, a label, an entry, and then a bunch more buttons here. So all that is stuff that we've done before. So now the new thing here is the place. So before we were just doing b1.pack, right, and put it into that scene. But here, right, we're using place. And so what we want to do is one of the easiest ways is just to specify the x and y coordinates. So b1 is here. That should have the label have the text alpha on there, b2 bravo, and so on and so forth. So let's run that and see where it's located. So here's what it looks like. I don't know why I colored this button red and had blue writing, but just you can see how that's done. And I did alter, I guess, the size of these two with these height and width attributes. So those things are things you can specify, but you've seen before where we didn't have that. So these are optional here. Okay, so alpha, right, is at 0, 0. So that's kind of at this top left-hand corner there. And then B2 is the label with bravo on there. So that's at 100 over and 100 down, right? And then this entry is at 200, so 200 over, and then 0 down. So you can see it's located there. And then B4 is the button that has delta on it. That's at 300, right? So 300 over, and then 100 down, and so on and so forth. When I resize this, you can see it will go right past that. So a user could resize this and exclude, one of the controls or widgets that you have in there. Sometimes you might not want that to happen, especially say like on a mobile device or something like that. So we'll see that the different managers have different behaviors when it comes to that. Okay, so that's how place works. You have complete control over where these things are located. But again, if you want to if it's really complicated and you have a lot of stuff to place in there, it's going to be a grind to have to specify these coordinates for everything. Okay, so that is place, and then with go back here. The next one is pack, which we've been using before, right? That's what we started with. The pack geometry manager, what it does is basically place widgets so that they're above or below each other, so in like a vertical fashion, or side by side of each other, so in a horizontal fashion there. And it's pretty limited. That's basically what it does. Although there are quirks and things that are in there. But you can make fairly complex user interfaces by using frame widgets as well. So with a frame, it's another container. So you can have a frame with widgets in there and then use pack to place two frames side by side or above one another and so on and so forth. Okay. But again, if you want to make a complicated layout, it's going to be a lot of work with pack and getting everything to be laid out exactly how you want it and correctly. But there are some primary use cases for pack. Number one at the top, right, would be putting a widget in its parent so that it fills the entire parent. So maybe something like a canvas, right, that you want to use to draw on, and you just want it to take up the entire window, main window. Then you could just put it in, you could just pack right into the parent that it's contained in. And then there's a default or optional parameter in there with pack, which is fill. And I think you set that fill parameter to both, and it will take up both the X and vertical and horizontal directions there. And then if you want to place a number of widgets in a vertical fashion, then pack is good. If you want to place a number of widgets in a horizontal fashion, then pack would also be good for that. So those are the main uses of pack. Again, you can make it as complicated as you want to, but it's going to take a lot of work and adjustment to get a good result there. Okay, so let's take a look at our pack geometry example. And let's see, pack looks like this. So here, this stuff is as before. I create pretty much all the same stuff here as I did in the previous example. And then here I use pack. And so previously, when we were using pack, we didn't use this side parameter in here. What we did was we just used pack, and it packed it however it felt like it. But here, what we can do is pack it sort of on the right side, on the left side, on the top, or on the bottom here. And so when you run this, you'll see the result of that. All right, so B1 is alpha. We packed that over on the right. So that button got packed over here. And then for B2, we packed that one on the left over here. That's what it says, Bravo. And then B3 was this entry, and it's packed up here on the top. We also packed B4, which is the button that says Delta. We also packed that on the top as well, and so you can see it's packed horizontally here. And on B4, we had some padding. I padded it in the X direction 5, which you probably can't see, but in the Y direction, I padded it 20. So you can see that created a little space between those two, between the entry and this button here. You can see down here on the bottom, I packed the last two buttons, and I didn't use any padding, so you can see that they're sort of flush against one another. Let's change one of these to right and take a look at that. I'm going to change this one to right and then run it again so you can see. So now Bravo is packed over here to the right. So you can see it's good for stacking things in the vertical direction and stacking things in a horizontal direction like that. Okay. Again, these side parameters are optional. All of these here are optional. We didn't use those in the previous examples. Okay, so that is the pack geometry manager. And then the last one is grid. And sort of as the name implies, it packs things out in a grid of rows and columns. So the rows would go in the horizontal direction, the columns would go in the vertical direction. The rows and columns are numbered starting at 0. So row 0 is the top row, row 1 would be the next row, and so on and so forth. And then the columns also start at 0. And of the geometry managers, grid is the most flexible of the 3 general geometry managers. So if you're trying to make a fairly complicated user interface, then you probably want to go with grid. Although you can use the others as well. It just depends on what you want to do. But I think grid is probably the go-to for most developers. So who use Tkinter. Okay. So one warning about this is grid and pack. Do not mix those in the same parent window. That's going to cause issues. I've had students come to me before after I told them that, and still trying to mix grid and pack. And my advice is don't do that. Okay, it's too much of a headache to have to worry about. So doing that. So don't do that. If you get stuck with that and asking me, kind of how it goes, then chances are that's going to be my advice to you. Is again, don't do that. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the geometry managers. For more details about everything, you can look at these 3 references here. These are all in the Tkinter book. And then also tkdocs.com. That's under the I added that under the references under course resources. They explain how the grid geometry manager works, including the algorithm. There's a link to the algorithm that exactly how grid works. So there's tons of details here that I haven't mentioned in those videos. If you find yourself, wanting to do more with these layout managers, then go to those. On the test and things like that, I'm not going to specify that you have to use any one of that. You have to use any specific one of these layout geometry managers. You're free to kind of go with the one you feel most comfortable with. Okay, that's it for this one. In the next video, we will take a look at this grid geometry manager example.